You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio. So hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Changing Reality. Welcome one, welcome all. As always, we're super excited to have you here with us at our show. If you are a returning viewer, thank you so much for joining us back in 2023. We're so excited to, welcome in the new year and be able to bring more amazing stories to each and every single one of you to hopefully make your year a little bit different than it was last year. And if this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the Changing Reality family. It's lovely to meet you. And for all of you who are new to the show, this is a show on Penn's WQHS Radio that features phenomenal people from all walks of life who are, in essence, changing their own reality. And through this show, we'll actually be hanging out and interviewing amazing individuals from social change makers, entrepreneurs, industry leaders, business owners, to even artists, musicians, and inspiring individuals from all across the world, and many of whom have actually spent quite a bit of time here on the Penn campus as well. And by hearing these stories of how they managed to not only create change in the lives of the people around them, but in their own lives as well, hopefully we'll be able to pick out little nuggets of wisdom that we can use in our own journeys and apply them in ways that are meaningful to us and that help shorten our own learning curves as well. And I wanted to do this show simply because I felt like there are a lot of people out there who do phenomenal things and make waves in the lives of those around them. And by learning those stories, it's personally been something that's been so integral to my journey as an entrepreneur, as a student, as an individual trying to live my dreams. And I wanted to take those lessons that I learned from these conversations and bring it to all of you out there as well. So that hopefully, as we all sit as kind of a fly on the wall, listening to these experiences, we're able to translate them into ways that are meaningful to us. And to show you how powerful I think the effect of stories has been in my own life, I actually owe everything that I have to stories. I actually founded and run a youth movement called Ascendance back at home in Malaysia, which is where I'm from, that today collaborates not just with our own Malaysian Ministry of Education, but with educational institutions and organizations in over 28 countries to help provide an alternative education platform for any student who wants to change their reality. So we work with students from elementary all the way up to college through various sessions, programs, experiential learning activities, and projects that help students discover their passion, learn about themselves and the world around them, and at the same time, take what it is they're learning to start their own careers while they're still in school that creates meaningful impact, not just for themselves, but for those around them as well. And to date, we've been fortunate to work with over 50,000 students, 970 communities, and have incubated countless number of student-run projects, social enterprises, all run by students as young as 8 to 20 years old. And the reason we've been able to do all of that has been stories. It's been kind individuals who've been willing to take their time out, come and share what they learned in their journeys, and in the process, impact, inspire, and impart the missing knowledge and the missing kind of gaps in our own abilities to these students. And just like that, I hope that this show is that same platform for all of you so that you can get the stories that inspire you, that help you in the things that you're doing and in changing your own reality. So if there's anything specific that you want to talk about, if there are any, I would say, little tips or experiences that you need to excel in the work that you're doing, let us know as well so that we can reach out and organize sessions that best bring value to all of you. And with that, I think we'll move on to our session today. We have a truly amazing speaker with us who I think is probably, as I mentioned just before this interview, someone who has lived many experiences that we as students right now can only dream of, in a sense. Our speaker today is an experienced strategy and operations executive. She has been a leader in guiding people. She's been a leader in the finance industry. And she's also been a student who pursued her MBA here at the Wharton School. With over 10 years of experience at large tech companies from Google, LinkedIn, SAP, startups that are leading change and leading their industries from Dropbox to Clearbit, and even some of the premier finance companies that we all dream of, from JP Morgan to Goldman Sachs. This amazing individual has used her phenomenal problem solving, collaboration, analytical, and communication skills to actually prove herself in the roles of driving strategy and operational initiatives. And today we'll be speaking to Ruchi on her experiences, how her journey was since her time at Penn, and hopefully get some tips and tricks on how we can get started in a career like hers as well. So without further ado, let's bring our brilliant guest speaker onto our virtual stage.
And really excited to be on today to just to have this conversation together.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm very excited to speak to you. We spoke previously, and I was absolutely blown away by your story, by just who you were as an individual. That I thought, oh my gosh, I had to get her on the show. So I really appreciate you taking the time out. And I mentioned the whole Wharton MBA and all of the experiences, from finance to startup to tech. You seem to be at like every Penn student's dream job at the same time. So I'd love to get into that. But I think your story actually starts even before your time at Penn. You actually, I think, did your bachelor's in the world of finance, in arts, economics, and accounting, if I'm not mistaken, at the University of California in LA. So tell me a little bit about your time before you were in Penn. How were you like as a student? How did you answer that question of what are you going to do in university and where you're going to go, that I think many incoming students are still thinking about? So tell me a little bit about you and your background.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I studied economics and accounting at UCLA. And I got into that. I actually come from a family that primarily is in the field of medicine, and realized that I wanted to be in a field where I was interacting with people more often, and was really utilizing my people skills and also my analytical skills, and really fell in love with the field of economics. And that's what led me to major in that field. But I think one of the most enjoyable experiences that I had at UCLA, and the stories that I remember, were from a lot of the extracurricular activities I did. So one organization that comes to mind is the consulting organization that I was part of, called Bruin Consulting. I was able to lead conferences and case competitions. And I think one of the experiences I really bonded with was when I went on a retreat with my fellow Bruin Consulting members, and we got really close and we connected, and we were able to share professional experiences, personal experiences. And these are people that I still keep in touch with today. We've gone to each other's weddings. We still celebrate birthdays together. And so it was really a special experience for me. And when I think back to college, a lot of my most special experiences were from a lot of the extracurricular activities that I did.
No, that's amazing. And you mentioned that you wanted a more people-facing job. So I was surprised that you picked finance. I mean, that's not the exact thing that pops into mind when I think people-facing finance. Like
Yes.
I get it now, like understanding the industry. But how did you find that was the fit for you in a sense? I think like many people that I speak to, we come from similar backgrounds in a sense, where our family we have done like a particular field or particular industry, and have been very heavily focused. And when they want to break out, it can be like a bit trying to find the right resources or the right path that's meant for us. So was it classes or a particular club or a particular experience that made you realize that this was the field that you were leaning to? Or did you just kind of like throw a dart at a board and then, decide from there?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It was mostly, I think, so I really liked a lot of my economics classes. And I had this opportunity through this company it's called Sponsors for Educational Opportunity. And through that program, you could, they would match you with a company on Wall Street. And I think through a lot of those conversations, I realized that a career in finance would be a really great foundational area for me to start in. And I think I'd originally started, exploring my career, I think between my sophomore and junior year of college in the accounting field. And I realized it wasn't as exciting to me as something like as pure finance or even consulting. And so that's what allowed me to make that shift. And then I met a lot of people through the Sponsors for Educational Opportunity program and talked to them about their work in the finance industry, and being on Wall Street sounded really exciting to me, especially right out of college.
No, I can definitely see the appeal. And you actually had one of your first few internships at Goldman Sachs, right? Which again, how do you even get an internship like that in the first place? And I know that for many people who want to go into either investment banking or finance, that's like an ideal like opportunity to, like, or their dream internship. But
Mhm.
many of them are often, like, I would say, not exactly prepared for, like, the work lifestyle of it, or the actual experience of putting what they were learning into practice. So what was it like for you, having that internship and getting a glimpse of this industry that you wanted to see yourself in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was as my first real professional experience, it was definitely intimidating at first, being at Goldman Sachs, being in New York City, across the country. And I think I really had to rely on a lot of my, my soft skills that I had learned, like the, ability to connect with people, my empathy skills, and a lot of like attention to detail. A lot of those skills came into were really effective in my role when I was at Goldman Sachs. And a lot of the stuff you do learn on the job. I think you have mentors and managers there that want to make sure that you're successful. I'd say what really helped differentiate just in my class itself, and when I looked at even my JP Morgan experience and my analyst class, a lot of it was the technical skills. So the people that had invested in, had really strong Excel skills or modeling skills, had taken the time to learn programming, they were able to be a lot more efficient and effective when they started in the workforce. And, one example that comes to mind is one of my colleagues in my JP Morgan analyst class, who had taken a lot of Excel classes, and he'd actually taught a lot of Excel classes too in college. He was someone that we all looked to when we first started at JP Morgan. And so I'd say, if there's opportunities to invest more in that now, I definitely encourage investing in some of those technical skills.
That's a really good point. I feel sometimes we take those skills for granted, especially now we're like, I can Google it, and then you get there and like, I can't Google this, and you realize, oh no.
Yes, I completely agree. And a lot of the times, in class, you're learning really interesting stuff, but a lot of it's theory based. And so when you can get opportunities, like when I was in college, I participated in a lot of case competitions, and I got to create presentations, create pitches, utilize my Excel skills, things that I wasn't necessarily utilizing on a day-to-day basis in my classes. Those were some of the skills that I was most able to apply when I started working at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan.
No, very cool. And you mentioned JP Morgan, so we should talk about your time there as well. And I think that was one of your first few roles outside of college. Again, super crazy. Tell me how you got in the first place, and tell me about what was your first, I would say, first couple of months or first year of experience. I know you did, I think, one of their kind of management trainee kind of programs, and that took you, I think, all the way to Hong Kong as part of your work with them. But how was it like from you, the fresh grad perspective of, first of all, getting into that company, and then having this whole rotation of experiences that you're just going through?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got my opportunity at JP Morgan through the same program called Sponsors for Educational Opportunity. And when I was in New York City for my summer internship at Goldman Sachs, I had the opportunity to interview at other companies as well, as part of the program. And I ended up that summer getting 2 offers from both Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, and I had to decide. And ultimately, I chose the JP Morgan opportunity. Yeah, it's definitely fortunate.
It's so hard, the tough choices. Yeah.
But I think I ultimately chose JP Morgan because of the rotational aspect of it. I wanted to get exposure to a lot of different functions, and it was really exciting to me. There was also the opportunity to potentially go internationally. And so those are all things that really attracted me to that JP Morgan opportunity, and ultimately why I chose to start my career there.
And in terms of once you got there, again, like, there's always this expectation versus reality thing. I think you answered it pretty well in the previous question. But now, I've heard, at least these are the rumors I've heard as a dumb college student left in the woods. But I've heard that, these like management training programs can be a little bit intense. You're on your feet. You've got to, like really be able to not only learn quickly, but also be able to apply that quickly. And again, as you mentioned, your role had some international aspects of it. You had to go abroad. You had to apply that, in a different culture and in a different environment at the same time. So again, tell me a little bit about how you were able to kind of take these things that you were learning and apply them in different situations now that you were more into the working world.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest skills that came to me, especially in the rotational program, where every 6 months I was in a new role, was the ability to to problem solve, to deal with ambiguous situations. So a lot of times you weren't getting much direction. You had to figure things out pretty quickly on your own. And so I think it was a combination of figuring out, how to be resourceful, how to find the resources on your own, and also the ability to connect and to reach out to people. And so a lot of the information that I learned, and even the opportunity to go to Hong Kong, was from the connections that I had made. So I took the time every week to at least meet with 2 or 3 people that were outside of my team, to get to know them, to learn about potential different opportunities at the company, even thinking about my next rotation. And so a lot of times the people that I connected with would be able to share helpful information and with me, including members, colleagues who had actually gone through a rotation that I'd done in the past, and would be able to tell me, like, these are some of the things that really worked for me in that rotation. These are some things that maybe you should prepare for that I struggled with. And so I really leaned on other colleagues and connections I had to navigate a lot of the first few years of JP Morgan.
And I love that point you made of being able to reach out to the right people and have those conversations and being proactive in that. Was that something that came naturally to you? The ability to speak to people, to network to people, or was it something that you had to learn to do, in a sense? Because I feel like many times we don't think of asking for help once we're in the midst of something, and at least now I know a lot of people who kind of succumb to the inner turmoil instead of asking for help and reminding ourselves that other people have been here before. Was that a phase that you went through? And if so, how did you start reaching out? Where do we even begin, being a new person in an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a muscle I've built over time. And I'd say there's still situations now where, it's not the most comfortable thing to do, to ask for help or to reach out. And I think what I tell myself is that if I don't ask, the answer is always going to be no. And I've used that both in reaching out for help, and also when I am in any negotiation conversations. And I think what has helped me to do that, I think I've found a lot of the benefits that I've seen from it. I think for both, as I'm looking to even switch industries from like finance to the tech industry, or looking for even the Sponsors for Educational Opportunity program that I had, it was from taking the time to actually meet with people, express my interest, say this is something, raise my hand, this is something that I'd be really interested in doing. And only through that were they able to know that even put my name in for being considered for this opportunity. And so I think it was after seeing like the continuous benefits from doing that, I realized like how important it was, and that majority of the best opportunities that I've had in my career have been through those connections. And so really making sure that I'm investing in those.
Yeah, absolutely lovely, and it paid off. Congratulations, you became an associate. You went up the rank. Really cool. And what I was also really curious about was how you found your niche within the organization itself. I think specifically when you were an associate, and correct me if I'm wrong, you actually focused a little bit more on kind of like corporate insurance and healthcare companies of kind of like $1 billion and above in revenue. And this is different from like a management training position when you're trying out all of these different things. So number one, how do you kind of figure out what is the thing that you're good at, and how do you communicate that to the team around you so that you get the position in the areas that align with your strength?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. It's really taking the time to, I'd say I would reflect after each of my rotations, or even after a project was done, on what aspects I really liked about it. What were the moments where I like really lit up and that I was really excited about, and that just kind of they were challenging to me, but were still really exciting. And I tried to, think about, was it a specific skill set that I used in that? Was it, the project? And I tried to make sure that my next rotation had more of those aspects, those moments that I really lit up and that I really felt excited about.
So you kind of like slowly crafted it, and you're slowly kind of shaped it in a sense. What do you think was and I say this because you have a very interesting story in the startup world that I want to move into. But overall, what do you think was your biggest lesson, either for your career or personally as well, that you got from the finance industry? Or what was the thing that it taught you about yourself that you didn't know about prior to, entering it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say that just the ability, like one story that comes to mind was I was I was selected to go work in Hong Kong for 6 months. And as part of that, I had to figure out how to improve JP Morgan's cash operating model. And it had been an issue at the company for the last 15 plus years. And, several people had actually worked on it. And, at that point I was 22 years old and they were asking me to figure out the solution. And as intimidating as it was to be, in a room of 15 executives telling them how to improve their cash operating model, it really allowed me to lean into my skill set and have faith in it and confidence that I had the ability to do that. And I think through a lot of interviews, gathering information, my own research, I presented the improvements that I suggested for the cash operating model, and they were able to invest $8 million in improving the cash operating model. And so I think just getting in situations that I felt uncomfortable and that were intimidating to me at first, those were the experiences that I grew the most and that had the most impact on my professional career.
Oh, super cool. And I guess with that, I want to talk about your experiences, in the next phase, I don't know. In my brain, I've categorized your life in phases. I'm sorry for being so reductive, but like after that, you actually made a bit of a pivot from this industry to, I think, a little bit more tech startup. You actually went in at a strategy and operations role at Dropbox. So I know Dropbox. I think they're a super huge company, and it's crazy that I think it's a tool people use almost on a day-to-day basis. Why did you like choose to make this switch? Did you just get so tired of using Dropbox, in the office one day you're like, I'm gonna go fix their strategy and operations? Or how did you make that career switch?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was looking for, I think at that point, finance had given me a great foundation. I was looking for an environment that was a little bit more faster paced and that I was seeing more day-to-day changes. And that's what really excited me about the tech industry, where a lot of the changes were, there are new features every week, or, if there was a lot of things that hadn't been figured out. And so you just kind of were put in a situation where you just had to figure it out. And that to me was really exciting. And that's what got me really interested in moving into the tech industry. I talked to a lot of my friends who were in that industry just to find out, if that was, true in terms of the environment. That's how I learned that the environment was a little bit more faster paced. And I met with a lot of people in the tech industry before I made that shift and realized it would be a really exciting next phase for me.
Tell me a little bit about the process of having these conversations, speaking to people, and formulating your decision. Because I know so many people who just wake up one day and they're just like, I'm gonna do this, and they just get kind of so sick of what they're doing, and they're like, I'm gonna do this, and they put very little and minimal thought into it and in making that switch, and then they often backtrack and go, oh wait, this is not what I wanted either, in a sense.
Yeah.
How did you you seem to be really well prepared in making that decision, or at least well informed. How do you line up those opportunities, or where do you find the people to talk to, in a sense, for people out there who maybe want to make a similar pivot in their career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first usually start with my alumni. So now, for example, the Wharton MBA program that network has been great. Penn alumni just in general have been wonderful. My college alumni, and then friends in my network or mutual friends of friends have been really great in terms of connections to start with. And then, usually after those are, so when I do reach out to them, I usually ask them, how did you get into this field that you're in? What do you like about it the most? What are some of the challenges? And I really dive into learning more about what their day-to-day look like, and see how if that matches with what my interests were and the moments that I really lit up and that I was really doing my best work when I was in previous roles. And that's how I would figure out if there was a match or not. And a lot of times too, at the companies, some of the best companies I've worked at and the best experience I've had, a lot of it's due to the manager that I've had. And so even learning about the team, the function, how the manager is, that's all really important, really helpful information to get, especially if you have connections or friends that work at companies that you can learn more about that before you join.
Oh, okay. That I'm really glad I asked that question, because you laid that out really, really well. Okay, that's super helpful. I'm taking notes. But no, I'm serious. I was like, I didn't that was really good. Okay. Tell me also a bit about, getting into the role in the tech industry. Now that we've discovered that you were well prepared, I'm sure there's still something that caught you off to like by surprise. So what
Mhm.
was your first initial experiences that caught you off guard, or that you realized only when you're on the job about this tech and startup industry that you didn't know about earlier, in a sense? Or what was the most, surprising thing about the job and about the work you were doing in strategy and operations in tech that you can't read about in a textbook anywhere?
Yeah. Question. So some of it was the terminology, like completely different terminology than what I was using in finance that I didn't necessarily, wasn't my major in college. So a lot of that stuff was stuff that I would, look up, or I'd talk to people. A lot of people were really generous with their time and would take the time to walk through different, new terms or new areas for me. So that was always incredibly helpful. Um, yeah, I'd say it was probably just the pace. It was just so significantly different from, so in finance it was like usually it would have to go through multiple layers to get approval. So sometimes it'd take a month or two to get something approved. Where in tech, it was like when I started Dropbox, things were happening on like a daily, if not, a weekly basis, where it was like, we need to, ship this project or ship this new feature in the next few days. And so that pace, and especially if there's a lot of things to be figured out, it's really important to figure out how to prioritize your time, to be able to communicate what your priorities are, not only to the team that you're working with, but so that other people at the company know what you're doing as well. And so those were things that were really helpful when I first started in the tech industry, and that were significantly different, I'd say, than my time in finance.
Oh, and I love those points, especially the second one, because I run a startup, and
Mhm.
every day we're like, especially at this time of the year when we're trying to make plans for the rest of the year, which
Right.
by the end of the year will be something else. But
Uh-huh.
especially at this time of the year, every single day the plan is changing, and we're like, oh my goodness, what is happening? And
Right.
it requires a certain kind of mindset, being in the startup, where you can't get too like you can't get too attached to like this any particular thing that you're working
Yeah.
on, but you still have to give your best, and you still have to give 101, because in a day this could make or break the company at any given point in time, or it
Right.
feels like that in a sense. How do
Absolutely.
you adapt to that mindset, or what were the first instances that you felt that pressure? Give me one or two stories where you maybe worked on something, and then it ended up being scrapped, or you didn't take something seriously and that ended up being like the big thing, and everyone was like, oh my god, Ruchi, that's amazing, thank you. What was like the startup exclusive experiences that you felt were a little bit tasking in this point?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say that, there was a lot of, moments where it was like, we need to get this data out in the next like 30 minutes, like, and a lot of it wasn't readily available. So, and nobody really knew the answer. And so it was like figuring it out and a really fast turnaround time. And I think I got really used to that pace after, the first few experiences, but I'd say the first experience, it was definitely intimidating, to be in a situation like that and to be able to quickly figure out. But I relied on a lot of the skills that I learned in finance and before, in terms of, how to be resourceful, how to find information quickly, and how to present that. And so one of the things that comes to mind is, at Dropbox, it was responsible for figuring out how to improve our retention. So customers that had left Dropbox, had improved that. And we realized that we were losing a lot of customers to expired credit cards. And what we did was we actually ran a campaign to reach out to customers that had expired credit cards 1 month before their renewal date. And through that opportunity, we were able to identify $200,000 immediate revenue and $1 to $2 million in future opportunities. And that to me was a really exciting experience for me, because it started from just analyzing what we had, figuring out both like talking to customers, figuring out what our churn looked like, and where we were losing. What the low-hanging fruit was, and through that, then actually running an initiative and then seeing the impact and result. And that ability to do that, it was much faster in the tech industry, I'd say. And that those are moments that got me really excited and energized. And I had just a lot of opportunities like that when I was working at Dropbox.
I I think that that's a very good point, especially when you're in that very fast-paced mode. There's a lot more friction than you expect, because you're in a startup, everything's very collaborative. You have like five people doing like the job of like 50 people. So at the same time, it's like you also there can sometimes be tension within like team members, and it's very natural because everyone's got different priorities, everyone's working on different things at
Right.
different speeds. Did you ever feel like that pressure between the people you're working with, your teammates, in a sense? And if so, how do you actually navigate that, resolve that, work together, and make sure everyone's on the same page, or enough on the same page to get things done?
Right, absolutely. You're saying when there's different priorities, and everyone thinks their priority is, this is the number one thing that needs to be done right away. Yeah. Um, so what's always been most helpful for me is learning about what are the key, like what's the what's the North Star of the group, or what are the key things that, like, metrics or projects on how we're being measured, or the most impact we want to make, and really making a lot of my decisions based off of that. And so if that's not clear, it's really taking the time to understand, like, get that clarity around that, of what the direction of the team is, and the biggest priorities for that quarter. And then that would help to guide a lot of my conversations, saying that, based off of what we've discussed, and like what we're trying to solve for, as most important, like, this project is going to impact that the most. And so I want to make sure I do good quality work. It's always a trade-off, because if you're doing like 100 things, you can get all those done, but it's not going to be as high quality work as if you're doing like deeper work in one or two types of projects. So it's like, it's talking through the trade-offs of that as well, of like, I could do all of these things, but it might not do as deep or as quality work as if I just focused on like these two things that would have the most impact. And so a lot of times it was being able to have those conversations, after understanding, what the key goals were for the either the team or the company at that time, and then which projects would have the most impact on that.
No, very, very well said. And I think after that, you spent time in Wharton. So, yay, amazing. What made you decide to do an MBA, in a sense? And why Wharton? I mean, we're very much better off for having you. I can't say that on behalf of Wharton, but I'm so glad to have met you through Penn. But why do you decide to pick Penn, in a sense?
Yeah, so the reason I decided to go and pursue my MBA was at Dropbox. I was really impressed with a lot of the leaders that had an MBA, and just the way that they approached problems. I could tell they approached problems in a different way, and that's what really inspired me to go and pursue my MBA. And Wharton was a dream. I had visited the Penn campus a few times. I'd known people that have gone there, but getting to go to Wharton it really felt like it would be incredible for both like professional and personal wise. And so that's what made me, I visited the campus. I fell in love with the people. A lot of the professors there were professors that I had like read about, and I had, they were industry leaders. And so it was an opportunity that I absolutely could not have turned down.
No, very cool. And what would what do you think? And again, they were hating for this question, so we'll keep it between us. What do you think was the most important thing that you learned from Wharton and Penn that you still use today in your career? And I'm sure there's 100, but what is something that you learned, whether it's not even from the classes, from the people, or even just from the environment, that you still apply, or that you think fundamentally altered the way you look at your career?
Yeah. Ooh, it's a good one. I'd have to say, I'd probably say that the classes where I had the most like external interactions, I think the two classes that come to mind are one, the negotiation classes that I took. I think those are ones that like actually like day to day I've been able to utilize both in personal and professional experiences. So just being able to have the opportunity to interact with my classmates and actually do live negotiations was really helpful to just get more comfortable in that skill. And then I'd say I found the public speaking classes really helpful too. I think those were classes that and like the pitch competition. I did the Penn Startup Challenge. And those together, like just having the opportunity to put together like a pitch presentation, actually presenting and working with a team, that I think those were some of the most fulfilling experiences that I had that I've been able to apply now, even, as in my actual career, on a day-to-day basis. So.
Yep, and that was also something else that I wanted to talk about was your
Yeah.
experiences in the startup channel. Which I think you were winner of one of their People's Choice Award. It was,
Yeah.
and Penn Startup Challenge is like the event of the entrepreneurship community.
Yeah.
So the fact that you were in was amazing. The fact that you won was absolutely brilliant. Tell me a little bit about how you went about forming your startup and why you wanted this experience in the first place. Like why enter startup competition? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I actually did a class at the Wharton San Francisco office it was between my first and second year. And through that, it was an entrepreneurship class. And through that class, we had to actually come up with a business idea. And that's where I met the team that I did the startup challenge with. And I wanted to go through because I, always, have a passion and dream for starting my own thing. And this was such a great experience to actually be able to do that. And through that, we had to actually put together a pitch and a presentation. And we really liked the team that we had formed. We loved the idea, and we're like, what we should enter the Penn Startup Challenge, and we did it. And it was a really incredible experience. I think meeting so many different people, actually going through the process of putting together a pitch deck was really exciting.
And the cool thing is, you already had a little bit of this startup experience when you were at Dropbox previously. You would go on to, I think, intern at Google, and work at LinkedIn, which is a little later in the startup stage. Like they're like the other end of the spectrum of startups in a sense. So this
Yeah.
early stage experience, is just kind of like nice to complete your little portfolio of the startup track. What do you think this experience taught you that help you reflect or navigate or fit in a different piece of the puzzle in the later parts of your career as well? Did it help you see things differently? Did it help you, understand the organizations you were working with later in your career better from the experience of kind of, pitching, going through with the kind of, I would say, framework of putting a startup up for presentation of doing the MVP and all of that?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think when we were, participating in the Penn Startup Challenge, there was a lot of areas that I hadn't gotten a ton of exposure to. So, for example, a marketing area, or going through how we'd actually like our sales, or who our ideal customers were. So a lot of that wasn't necessarily things that I had experience in from my past professional experience, but I figured it out. We were able to utilize aspects of our past, combined experience to determine that. And what it made me realize was I'm never going to know 100% of every single function or area, but as long as I know like enough of like the high level, there's always people that I could ask, or that I could reach out to learn more about that. And so that confidence was really helpful to just know that like in any area I go in, I'm not going to know 100% of everything. And as long as I know like, the high level, or I'm able to know who to reach out to, I can figure out pretty much anything.
Very cool. And I, as I mentioned, I wanted to also talk a bit about your time in LinkedIn and your time, your internship in Google.
Mm-hmm.
We often see these companies from the outside. We use the platform. Everyone work like we use Google, we use LinkedIn, like normal stuff. What did you get from the experiences of working inside of the company that we the user would never like be privy to in a sense? What was the perspective you gained, and tell us a little secret in some ways, in a sense? What are we missing out from our view of these platforms and how they're run?
Absolutely. I think from both of those experiences, I was really impressed with the focus on the people there and the culture that had been created. I think a lot of even aspects of different tech companies I've worked at, I could see that a lot of what they had implemented was based off of what had been done at like companies like Google and LinkedIn. And so just being inside of that, it was really fascinating to see a lot of that be true. So I think even from things like the onboarding process to how the trainings that they had offered to employees, to managers, to a lot of the professional development, the offsites. For example, LinkedIn, what I was really impressed about was they were always in this state of transition planning. So even if you had just started in the role or in the first few months, you're documenting all the work that you did and preparing for, if there was any transition. So if there was, so you moved to a new role or someone else took over your role, you had that documentation in place. And that to me was just really impressive that they had that structure and process in place already. And then just their way that they did, surveys as well to ask for employee feedback, and the way that managers actually every quarter met with their team to learn about the feedback they'd given, and be very vulnerable with the feedback that they'd received, and actually come up with action plans that were tracked every quarter. That was really impressive to me. That there was so much focus on that.
No, absolutely lovely. And I also love, that as you said, it's nice being inside of these organizations that, kind of set the standard in the industry. You mentioned that, people refer to them. And you specifically, when you were in LinkedIn, you had the role of kind of, I think, in strategy, was it strategy and operations as well?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about how being part of this organization, what that role really means in a sense, and how you're able to navigate to plan forward, especially as we discussed earlier, in an industry that is at times very volatile. There's a lot of things that are happening on a day-to-day basis. Like even right now, I think like just keeping up with the news will give you a heart attack if you're in the tech industry. So
Yeah.
I'm sure they turn on their TV every day in horror. But in any way, like how is it like, and you are in charge of strategy. How do you plan for that? How do you operate in a sense? Tell me
Yeah.
a little bit about the inside feelings that you had as you were navigating this, and what you did right in the sense that enabled you to excel in the role.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So when I was at LinkedIn, I was part of their LinkedIn learning group, and our team was responsible for figuring out, I was specifically supporting the customer success organization within LinkedIn Learning. And so it was determining things like what the headcount would look like, how to plan for finances, what the best strategic initiatives were to invest in. And it was really interesting time for me because I got to partner with, both the head of the global head of customer success, as well as my manager who's leading strategy and operations. And it was interesting to learn about a whole new aspect of like LinkedIn Learning specifically. And then I think to figure out both from like an analytical and business aspect, like how to put that all together into making, like, we would have to make business cases for why, what the headcount should be increased to for every quarter, what our biggest strategic initiatives were, and what the impact of that would be. And so that to me, that was really exciting to be able to have the opportunity to do that.
Very cool. And I also think that I like that same kind of like view of, looking at this bird's eye view of, customer success and all that was helpful in the next role that you had, which I think was at this very cool startup called Clearbit as well.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I thought was very interesting about your role here is that you actually had to like kind of manage their entire customer success organization. You had people reporting to you, and I think you served in two roles while you were there, which is their head of customer success, and then later their head of people engagement and inclusion. So tell me a little bit about, number one, how that works in a startup that is slightly at the smaller scale compared to the ones that you'd been at before, and that was in a bit more of a growth stage. So even faster pace from the early ones. How were you able to bring in all the lessons that you had to be able to do that role of customer success and people engagement, two very hard things to do in a pace like that? How were you able to bring your experiences and synthesize them in a way that enabled you to achieve that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say definitely drew a lot from my previous experiences. I think when I was at LinkedIn, I was more on the supporting side of, the operation side of supporting the customer success team. And Clearbit was the first time that, I was working directly, leading a customer success organization. And I realized that a lot of the skills I had from my past professional experiences, like building strong connections, both with my colleagues and with customers, was incredibly helpful. Being able to figure out a whole new function or area. Those are things that I drew on my previous experiences from being in the Penn Startup Challenge and not necessarily knowing every single function that was there, or switching from my finance industry to the tech industry. And so really, I think some of the foundational things of like figuring out the vision for the team, figuring out what our key metrics were, figuring out where the biggest gaps were, building connection and trust with my team was so incredibly important, especially as we went through some stages of during the pandemic when we went 100% remote. And it was really important for me to have taken the time out early on to build trust with my team and to build those personal connections. And that went such a long way in terms of us meeting our business goals and results, was taking the time up front to invest in those relationships.
No, very, very cool. And as you said, you were there during the pandemic, which is I wouldn't say the hardest time, but a very interesting time. You were at home, you were still burnt out, you had all the time in the world, you had no time. It was a time of a lot of confusion in a sense. And again, at that time, you had a role that was very much involved in engagement of people, inclusion. I would say it's the hardest time to have like that portfolio under you in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think were things that you had to think about during the pandemic that enabled you to still bring together the team, to make sure that everyone was still involved, and also to make sure that you were able to consistently transition out of the pandemic once it started to taper down and we started coming back more in person? We started going back to a sense of normal at the very least. So how was the pandemic different, and how are you transitioning back to where we are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was different because it was the first time that we were really, as a company, 100% remote. And so transitioning from being able to see your colleagues and your team in person to everything being remote was just a new skill to learn. And I think we had to be a lot more intentional about the connections that we were making on a day-to-day basis. And so some of the things that we did were, with the team, we try to do more fun events every week that were outside of our day-to-day one-on-ones or our team meetings.
Do more fun events. Be proactive about the fun events.
Yeah, we had to make sure we were adding that in, because it was so naturally built in when we were in the office, or we could just have lunch together, or we can go to get coffee together. But we had to make much more of an effort once the pandemic started to be able to do aspects of that, and then even just having a space for check-ins, or for being able to do like brainstorming together. A lot of that creative energy that we had, I remember being able to go with my team into a conference room and just being able to whiteboard and brainstorm ideas. Those were things that I had to be a lot more intentional about when the pandemic started, when we went 100% remote. And so those are things that I think that definitely helped a lot. And then I think is being really clear on what the top goals are, what the things that you want to achieve. And then I realized everyone on my team had a different preference or process to how to achieve those. But as long as they knew what the vision was and what the end results were, those were really helpful guiding posts. And the process themselves, we would work together and figure out what was best for them. So it allowed me to not have to micromanage what the work that was being done, but to still be there to provide guidance and support, and to help the team members accomplish the goals that they wanted.
Super, super cool. And I guess you have done like so many cool stuff, in finance, in tech, in startups in a way, and of course Wharton, amazing, cool. Gotta say, got it. Like, I have to say that in a sense. What do you think? Like, you, as we spoke about in the beginning, you wanted a career that was people facing, a career that that got that was different from what you had known. If you look back now in your whole career, in a sense, what do you think has been the most rewarding experience that you've had? And what's your advice to you of then, in a sense, to you who were in college, who was, an undergrad, still trying to figure things out?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'd say my most rewarding experience was my my opportunity that I got to work in Hong Kong when I was at JP Morgan for 6 months. I'd say it was rewarding in a few ways. One, professionally, I got to work on a really cool project that had a lot of visibility, that was invested in, and that I really got to build my skill set in. And then I'd say personally, it was really exciting because I got the opportunity to travel all around Asia. So every weekend, because we were in Hong Kong, I got to travel to a new place, and I was there with a few of my colleagues. And it's still to this date just a once in a lifetime opportunity, I'd say, to, for 6 months, almost every weekend, be able to travel to a different place within Asia was so exciting. And I think I learned a lot about the professional culture too in Hong Kong, and how it was different from New York and from California, and the different places that I had worked. And that, I think, allowed me to be really adaptable early on, and to get into uncomfortable situations where I felt like I had the skill set to be able to navigate those situations. And I'd say, so, looking back, and even when I think about Wharton, and I know there's a lot of, lucky to be in a situation where we had opportunities to do trips together as classmates, is taking those opportunities to work abroad or to travel abroad. I think in college, I would have loved to do like a study abroad. I know some of my classmates had done like a language immersion where they, got to practice a different language in a different location. And I think those are opportunities that I think I would have taken more advantage of in college. And I think I mentioned also some of the technical skills too. So being able to learn things like whether that's programming or Excel skills, things that I would have been able to utilize in my day-to-day work more often. I think I would have probably invested more time in those.
No, lovely. So thank you so much for being on the show. I think you are just someone who's so insightful, and I just love talking to you about all of these different things. You laid out so many good tips in such a clear and concise manner, and I really appreciate all of your experiences as well. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you had as much fun as me and the audience did listening to you share your thoughts.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Harsha, and I'm so impressed with all that you've done, and I'm super excited to see all that you continue to do. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. And with that, I think our episode for Changing Reality has come to a close. I appreciate you being our guest speaker once again, and to our audience, as always, thank you so much for joining us, and see you again next Thursday here on Changing Reality. Bye.
You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.